across America. Live, this is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Thank you for joining us today here on Point of View. The first hour, we're going to talk about missions, but in a very different way. I suspect most of you have supported missionaries. You certainly have churches that support missionaries, and you know kind of how that works. But what about mission work in a place that's really dangerous? I mean, what about that? I mean, I think we have a much different kind of idea as to whether or not that's even possible. I want to shake some of your categories today when we get into some of this and educate you about a group called No Greater Commission. And we have a couple of guests in studio, so you can not only listen to this, but watch. And, of course, a little bit later, if you'd like to ask some questions, you are welcome to do so. First of all, sitting across from me, Kurt Parsons, who is an ordained pastor, but also the CEO of No Greater Commission, a 501c3 Christian charity that has teams that are active and use retired military service members, as well as federal law enforcement individuals and professionals and civilians in various backgrounds to go to war-torn areas. He actually has been very much involved in this and has kind of thought this through a number of years ago, which we'll talk about in just a minute. But, Kurt, thank you for joining us today here on Point of View.
Thank you for having me. We appreciate it.
We'll tell your story in just a minute, and I'll finish that story because that's kind of very integral to the rest of this. Also with us is Charity Gardner, and she is the Director of Medical Engagements for No Greater Commission. Began her service actually as a paramedic in the U.S. Army in the public health sector and still serves as a U.S. Army Reserve in Fort Worth, Texas. And Charity, it's great to have you here as well.
Thanks for having us, Kerby.
Okay, Kurt, give us the story because it's kind of interesting. When people think of missions in war-torn areas, those just don't compute. And you began to think about how that might be possible. Explain it if you might.
Yeah, well, first of all, our guys love Jesus. I mean, all of our team completely all in for Jesus Christ. And so we take what God's given us and the skill set that we have, and then we go, well, what can we do with it? And so it's like, well, we can go to these places that nobody else is going to,
right,
and advance His kingdom, because all the other things are going to go away. All the buildings, all the houses, all the other things on earth will go away, but the people who give their life to the Lord, who walk with Jesus Christ, will not. And so we were like, well, we need to reach these people. And then you see the things that are going on throughout the world, and we go, well, God's given us a certain skill set. Let's use that skill set to advance His kingdom.
Well, again, just an incredible opportunity. And this really kind of came to you when you were involved, right, in the military?
That's right. That's right. I retired from the military 21 years. And then we saw our guys were just going to these places on their leave and going to Haiti, going to Africa, and like, how can we help you? How can we help? And so we're like, well, we need and the Lord put on my heart to start an organization. And so we did.
Charity, talk about some of the needs, because as an individual that really is looking at medical engagements, there are certainly a lot more needs in a war-torn area than are in a place where there's some amount of peace, isn't there?
There sure are. If you look at South Sudan, which is currently our focus for our coming mission will be South Sudan, you can look on any given day in the news and you'll find a long article about some things going on in South Sudan. Very, very few pieces in those articles will be something positive. So when you're looking at a country that's just being torn apart by war, and it started with their own civil war, and then ethnic group versus ethnic group, and now you're looking at their own military creating a lot of the violence that you see, that's something we can't comprehend. We can't fathom our own military creating these problems. So what's happening is all these people are being displaced, millions of people being displaced. And the biggest health concern problem with that, outside of not having access to care and not having physical buildings to be able to go to and reach care, is things like malnourishment. When they're being displaced and they're having to run over to the Congo or Kenya or the Central African Republic as a safe house, and if you think of that, the Central African Republic as being a safe house, they don't have the ability to farm anymore. They don't have the ability to even access food. So you're looking at malnourishment being a huge issue, and then all the things that are coming across because of that malnourishment, the needs are endless. I mean, they really are endless.
You know, here at Point of View, we raised a lot of money, and perhaps you heard that off air, that we were doing this for the various refugee camps because of the displacement that took place in Syria and as well as in Iraq. And these are individuals that in many cases were almost middle-class people in Iraq that all of a sudden leave, not even with enough clothing, certainly not with an ability to survive in the harsh winters that some of them ran into, certainly not able to provide for themselves. And so we certainly have understood what happens when you are a refugee and you no longer have a means of income, a means of supporting yourself, and sometimes not even enough clothing on your back.
Sure.
That's right.
Yeah, so talk a little bit more about how you get in. I would love to know, Kurt, just how you just show up someday. I mean, obviously there's some issues that are certainly front and center when you go to a war-torn country, especially like Sudan.
Well, we look around for the places to go and the people to help. And many times our guys have just gone to areas and literally landed and then started driving and going and looking. Yeah. In Haiti, we went and we looked for Christian organizations who are already doing it, locals who are doing it. And in Haiti specifically, we found a pastor he already had a school, he was doing it, he had a vision, he had a purpose, he had a calling from the Lord. And then what we tried to do is help equip them. And then and specifically in South Sudan, Pastor Stephen is a phenomenal leader. So we went there and we actually worked through our local church in Annapolis, Maryland. And they already vetted him. They already knew what was going on. They knew the type of people he was working with. And so then we went with the church and then interviewed him, see what was going on, and then started building that relationship with him. But sometimes we went to Zimbabwe and Kenya, we just went there, started searching for people, started looking at people. We generally will like to find a group that's already there and have a purpose and have a connection already made. But South Sudan right now, Pastor Stephen is one of the key leaders in this one region called Bor, and has been vetted, and then we started to work with him specifically.
That's the same thing we kind of dealt with when we were talking about those individuals that were displaced because of ISIS. We wanted to put this in the hands of the pastors that existed in some of those refugee camps because they have an ongoing relationship. There's a trust factor, a number of other things. But like you say, when you land in Zimbabwe, you just don't know where you're going. So you just figure out as you get there. Right,
that's right. And our guys that's what we've been trained to do is figure out things and assess the situation, assess who's making an impact, and then who to work with. And so we have a screening process, and we specifically look for the pastors for people who are following the Lord and are operating with a purpose and a commitment to advance His kingdom. And then we want to get behind them and help them with their vision, what God's doing in their life.
Going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about what this looks like when you're on the ground and what are some of the needs, how people can support you. I suspect some listening right now say, hey, can I join with you? You know, this sounds like something I might really want to try to do. So we have a link here, and it's to nogreatercommission.org. You can go there directly, although we have a link to it. It has a little bit about the mission, some about the history, as well as some of the leadership, and you're having a chance to hear from a few of them today in studio. And if you'd like to ask a question or make a comment, feel free to do so. But we are talking about, in particular, at the moment, South Sudan, and you will notice there that they have something for 2 4x4 trucks and 4 motorcycles, tools, training, pastors' conference, women's conference, all sorts of different things. And so if you are maybe on a church mission board, or maybe just as an individual say, well, I'd like to get involved, or I'd like to know more about that, we have made it very easy. Just click on the pictures that we have today of Kurt Parsons and Charity Gardner, and we will give you that opportunity. Let's take a break, though. When we come back, we'll talk about what this looks like, how that is deployed, what are some of the obstacles, and how you maybe can participate in it as well. So let's take a break. When we come back, we'll continue our conversation today as we talk about No Greater Commission, and we are excited about educating you about this very different way to look at missions. We'll have more right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
You know, we're all familiar with the racial controversies that developed at the University of Missouri. In the end, the chancellor and the president resigned. Once that happened, it was easy to see that the controversy and the subsequent resignations would have had a detrimental impact on student enrollment. Apparently, this caught the university off guard. Fox Sports has been able to obtain a copy of the interim chancellor's letter to the university community. He said, I am writing to you today to confirm that we project a very significant budget shortfall due to an unexpected sharp decline in first-year enrollments and student retention this fall. This should not have been an unexpected decline in student enrollments. Weeks of news coverage that catered to some of the outrageous claims and demands of campus radicals certainly would make both students and their parents reconsider whether they wanted to enroll in the University of Missouri. The interim chancellor went on to explain that the significantly lower enrollment leaves the university with a $32 million budget gap. And we might mention that the shortfall will continue each year as the smaller entering freshman class makes its way through various degree programs. In order to deal with this major financial hit, the administration has implemented an across-the-board hiring freeze for all units on campus. No new staff, no new faculty, no new raises. The annual merit increase program will be zero for the entire campus. Think of the irony. Many of the radicals wanted more African-American professors to be hired. Because of the racial controversy, no new professors, black, white, or Latino, will be hired this year or perhaps for many years to come. This is the huge financial cost when campus radicals get national attention and ruin a university's reputation. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
From Columbia Pictures and Affirm Films, Miracles from Heaven. How do we explain the impossible? Now playing, rated PG, miraclesfromheaven-movie.com.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Privilege today to talk about No Greater Commission, and if you'd like to join us at any point, 1-800-351-1212. In studio with us today, Kurt Parsons as well as Charity Gardner. And Kurt, let me come to you for just a minute. We've talked about Sudan, so let's use that as an example. That's on your website right now that people can see. But what does that deployment look like? When you put missionaries out there as well as other individuals, what's the composition of the team? What does it look like?
So the team is made up primarily of military men and women, but our team has some civilians who don't necessarily have that specific training and background. But specifically in South Sudan, what we do is we get together, we form a mission, we find out who has a need, and then in this one in particular, we'll be getting vehicles for this pastor and this ministry group out of Kenya, and then we'll be taking them and the supplies up through Uganda, up through Kenya to Uganda and into South Sudan. Because right now, South Sudan itself doesn't have, they're not selling trucks, they're not selling a lot of the goods and stuff. And so we bring it up there. And then in this one specifically, we're making a connection with several pastors that we know of in the region. So we're helping to team the whole church together as we go, so that they understand each other and then they have a safe haven to go to and work with. And so we're just building the whole Christian organization, the whole Christian ministry as a whole, as we go. God's kingdom, essentially, is what we're trying to do here.
Charity, talk about some of the health care issues, because, of course, you have a master's in public health, and you've worked in the area of emergency medical conditions and things like that. So what are all the needs? And matter of fact, in just a minute, we may even talk about what other people that maybe have your kind of skill set could join with you. But what do you encounter when you get there?
Sure. So I've been a paramedic with the Army for 13 years, and it gave me the opportunity. I was stationed in Louisiana at first, and I said, well, this isn't the part of the world I wanted to see. I didn't join to see Louisiana. And then I got to go to Italy, which was fantastic. And out of Italy, I got to spend a little bit of time in Africa, in the Congo. And that was one of the first places where I saw them practicing medicine, how other worlds practice medicine. Yes. In Afghanistan, it was what we do, right? It was our medicine. We were the ones performing any kind of medical care that we saw. So that wasn't so much an eye-opener because it was us performing medicine for Afghans. So in the Congo, I saw things like dental care where it's, a knee to the chest and pulling teeth out of the mouth with nothing else. And very different, vastly different than U.S. healthcare. And then we went to the Panama and things were very similar. So in South Sudan, it's not a matter of not getting great care or not getting comfortable care. It's a matter of not having any access to care whatsoever. And like I already said, other issues that come about like malnourishment. Right now, what they're doing at Mission Gardens of Christ is they also he has a small farm plot. So one of the things we want to work on is looking for the ability to create a water irrigation system and a way for them to clean that water so that they have access to food that they can grow themselves that's sustainable. So one of the big things we want to focus on is sustainability, not just throwing money at a project, but going and showing them how to produce it and how to maintain it, and giving them some resources for that. So kind of starting there with clean water and the ability to grow food, and then branching out from there, which will take some partnerships with some other organizations that are in the country. And then another role for me is to train our team. So if we're leaving and we're doing a convoy across 3 countries in Africa, it's important that everybody be on the same page and understand how to help each other. I can't keep that information to myself. Should I need the medical care, then I want Kurt to be able to hop over and do that as well. So training our own team, and yeah, we always need members for that.
Sure. Seems to me like you really have, in some of the places you're going, virtually no infrastructure. Maybe you have roads, but that seems like about all. But am I over extrapolating too much?
No, that's the essence of it. And a lot of us get our background. And the interesting part about our team dynamic is we've all operated in a combined total of about 100 countries. So we've had extensive knowledge and understanding of a lot of the third world or other world nations. I was in charge of the reconstruction in the Nuristan province of Afghanistan, and that's essentially what we were doing. We were helping to build. Right. We called it reconstruction, but it was just construction. About $100 million of roads being built because all the roads stopped there. Vertical construction, electrical, healthcare, you name it. We were helping to build it. And these are the things that we try to bring to South Sudan and to the places that have nothing whatsoever. Specifically, one of the key elements with our group is that we try to make it where it is self-sustaining. What we don't want to do, and one of the things that we've been looking for, is that we don't want to just throw money at it. In Afghanistan, we were throwing $53 billion a year at it. Yeah. And then I was in charge of building 2 hydroelectric dams. Well, once we leave, there's no one running the dam. I mean, and once they break, no one fixes it. And so what we want to do is help these people where they're doing it. And then if for some reason that the money from the West stops, well, they're still doing it. It's not a contingent on us giving a monthly contribution to it. So what we don't want to do is just throw money at problems, because we know that doesn't work. Specifically in Afghanistan, we had this big, huge wheat push that we're like, hey, we're going to empower the government. We're going to give everybody wheat because, that's what you do in third world nations. Well, they were already doing their own wheat. Yes. And then once the U.S. government, through the Afghan government, started giving them wheat, then they stopped growing the wheat. So they stopped irrigating their fields. So after a couple of years, their fields were all shot. And the people even came to me and said, why are you giving us wheat? We used to grow our own wheat. Well, what it did is it now destroyed the farmlands. And the other thing, too, is that the guy who was selling the wheat before on the street corner now is no longer able to sell it because it's all free. So in a fail swoop with good intentions, we destroyed a whole market, and we've done that over and over.
Well, and again, sometimes they aren't thinking about infrastructure. I came from a meeting where I was talking with somebody, interestingly enough, from Zambia, and he was talking about how they have, of course, a wet season and a dry season. And during the dry season, they always eat the same thing. He said, why do you eat this 2 times a day? He said, well, because we have to wait for the rains. And he said, 150 meters over here, you've got this clean river. I mean, not a polluted river. One's coming right from springs. Well, yeah, but we're supposed to water it from rainwater. I mean, they just had never thought about the idea of even creating a way in which they could grow other things other than during the rainy season. And so sometimes it's just a change in mental perspective that might be all that is necessary.
Right, and then helping them empower them. For example, they have a huge rainy season in South Sudan. Yeah. So one of the issues is drought during the time that there is no rain, but they have a vast amount of water. What they need to do is capture that water. Yes. And so the follow-on to this project is to help them capture that water, and we already started working with them and essentially design plans to have a retention pond and then the ability to pump it up into tanks so they can use it throughout the year. They don't have a water problem. They have a water capture problem.
Water capture problem. Good point. Again, that's the value of technology, the mindset, just some of the infrastructure that needs to be there self-sustaining after you leave. So very good points. Can we talk for just a few minutes about some of your successes? I know you're pretty humble individuals, but let's talk about Charity. Can you share a few things that you've done in the past that have been successful? We're sort of talking about this in the abstract. I'd love to find out a few things that have actually happened.
Sure. With graduate school, I went to the University of Cincinnati, like you said, and got my Master's of Public Health. When I was stationed in Italy, just having the ability to travel around and see how other people practice medicine and being able to see the needs that everybody has, that's what drew me to public health. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. has a great quote about that our lives begin the day that we become silent about things that matter. And I think at the heart of everything, Kurt is always hitting on our goal with No Greater Commission and talking about the Great Commission.
Right.
To love our neighbors and to love God. And everything else kind of falls in line after that. And I think if we turn an eye to these things that are happening in South Sudan and other countries, and we aren't there to help with the things that matter with people. That's our calling, is with people. So I have a few, probably less accolades than Kurt has. We put down our military accolades and awards. But some of the greatest things I've been able to achieve that I count as wins for the kingdom and for myself are the people that I've been able to serve and the lives that I've seen effective through medicine and through other avenues.
And some of the tough, and so you understand the dynamic, is that some of the tough things. So Charity and Charity's husband, they working in a country that we can't be like, hey, we were here working. Yeah. But they specifically climbed through the mountains, and what they did is they helped with some of the agriculture. They were there, and then they were essentially encouraging the people that were there, which was huge. When you actually show up and they just go, you just get a hug, and you have a Christian who shows up to encourage them is a huge deal. But specifically too, we were doing some work in Haiti, was where we really started the work, and we started with a pastor down there who was struggling with having an engineering project. So what we did is we got some engineering help with structuring his land. Water runoff was a big deal there.
Yes.
Having the actual design and infrastructure building done up. We helped him with these goats. He was doing some agriculture and some farming, and we're like, hey, you need to, not give them this many shots, or you need to do it. And so what we do is we go back, we get the expertise, help them with the information, and then help them fulfill the mission they're called to do. And he was running some schools there, so our team went back in there, and they were doing a specific project, just encouraging the children's. They brought balloons, and they did a medical cap, which is essentially medical care for the kids and some of the locals there. This is some of the things that we were doing. Haiti is an example of that.
We'll take a break, and when we come back, talk a little bit more about that. But let me give some of you a chance. If you have a comment or question, this is probably maybe challenging some of your categories. So I'd love to give you a chance to ask a question or make a comment. 1-800-351-1212, 1-800-351-1212. No Greater Commission. We'll have more right after this.
Is it just me, or does this year's election seem more contentious than ever? Even Christians are divided between which candidate to support, but one thing we must agree upon is the need to pray together. Each and every one of us must be on our knees asking God's mercy. Who is the right one to name the next Supreme Court justice, or 2 or 3? Honestly, I don't know, but God does. And we must petition him to act. Point of View has created its own campaign in the midst of the presidential campaign, Pray, Organize, Vote. We want to remind you of things to pray about. We want to help you educate fellow believers and get them out to vote. Sign up today at pointofview.net. Click on the banner, Pray, Organize, and Vote. The future of America is at stake, and God's people are called to be good stewards of our votes. After you sign up, look at the bottom right corner for the red box that says Donate. Your gift will educate and motivate Christians during this critical time. Don't put it off. Visit now, pointofview.net. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
In studio with us today in the first hour as we talk about No Greater Commission, an organization I think you need to know more about. Kurt Parsons and Charity Gardner with us. And Kurt, just for a few minutes before we get back to the organization itself, let's talk about what's on the website. As people click on your picture or the picture of Charity, they will go to nogreatercommission.org. And there's an opportunity for people to find out some of the organization. Now, as I think we've already alluded to, there are certain countries you're not going to talk about, maybe certain individuals that go to those countries you're not going to highlight, but still you have enough here where people can look at the leadership and some of the information and learn about these missions. So talk about what are those resources, and then what are some of the needs that you have?
Yes, sir. So on the website, it's highlighting the next mission trip that we're going to be doing, and that's to support Pastor Stephen at Mission Gardens of Christ in South Sudan. And we're trying to raise money. Essentially, we're trying to raise $130,000, and what that does, that gets 2 Hilux vehicles, it gets motorcycles, and it gets school supplies and some other supplies for their operation. And then specifically what those vehicles do is that gives them the ability to get children to and from the school they run. It gets pastors to and from where they go. When we were there last, pastors literally walked a day, in rain, and during the rainy season, it's no joke. And then, but also it gives them the ability to be self-sustainable. Is that the only money in that region right now is through aid money, UN coming through, World Relief, stuff like that. Now they can actually take people around and be able to charge a minimal amount to actually use the vehicles and take people around. So now they're able to start building money and start earning their own resources, build their own resources. And that also gets them in touch with the influencers of the area. So influence is essentially what we're trying to do here. We're trying to advance God's kingdom. So we're influencing this region. So giving him those resources gives him the ability to influence and raise funds. And then conversely, we're going to do training. We're giving them tools and training to work on vehicles, so that some of his staff members can actually work on their own vehicles, but also work on other vehicles in the region. So again, it gives them the ability to earn some money and be self-sustainable in operation. So
yes. And you're also talking about a pastor's conference and a women's conference, I understand.
That's right. And so Pastor Stephen specifically is very influential in the area. They want him to be the bishop in charge of everybody. And so whenever he brings the teams together, all the churches, not just one denomination, but all the denominations, he brings them together, and he has a great influence over them. And so we're going to be doing a pastor's conference, essentially helping to equip him with a pastor's conference. And then the last time we were there, the ladies of the area just self-organized and then essentially marched into there and wanted to have a voice, and they started explaining their needs. And so we were like, okay, clearly there's another underlying issue current here in the region. And so we want to hear their needs and help essentially equip Pastor Stephen, and then put our ladies in touch with them and just help empower them and give them a voice within the region. So there's a lot of dynamics that are playing out in this specific mission trip.
And you have some structures there. So there's classrooms, there's a dining hall, there's a library, there's some office complex. So in this case, you don't have to start from scratch, right?
We are not. And he already had the vision for this, and he was already executing this vision. And so we're just coming alongside and helping to equip Pastor Stephen and what they're already doing there.
Is this something that a church could support, or individuals? How did you go about raising the funds to go over there?
No, absolutely. Anybody can support. The only one supporting them right now is the church up in Annapolis, Maryland. Bay Area Community Church is supporting them. And then there's a couple other groups that know about Pastor Stephen, have worked with Pastor Stephen in the past. But we encourage anybody to work and help go through and help support Pastor Stephen. It's not, we don't want to, really, whole thing is kind of hard for us, because we don't want to highlight our group at all. I mean, if we could do this without having a website and having anything put out there about us, we'd prefer that.
Sure.
The only reason we even do this is so that we can raise the funds to help him. I mean, not $1 goes to any salary, anything. We're just trying to get this money, and then we take leave, we take time away from our jobs and our family, and then we all go and go do this. And so we do 1 to 3 mission trips a year, and the next focus is on Pastor Stephen and what they're doing.
So again, obviously people can help you financially, but I was just thinking if there are probably some listeners out there who might say, I might have that skill set. I've been in military, or I've been in public health, or I've been in emergency management. I know how to repair cars and trucks and, those kinds of things. Is there a place for somebody like that to ever join with you?
There is. And we've done a lot of vetting, and we've been building our team we've been mentoring and been a part of this team specifically for 11 years. And so there are opportunities for people to come in and join the team, join the mission. This next one, we do have the team. It's full. It's about 12 people going and a full operation. But there will be opportunities coming down the road that we'll be going back. And there's other countries that we operate in and that we're looking for and that we want to, essentially equip and help the other Christians in those areas. So the toughest places in the world, that's where we want to go. I mean, most of our team has operated out of Iraq or Afghanistan or some of these other places. And so we're in.
Well, what if you've got a doctor or a nurse or somebody who says, Charity, I want to follow along? Is there a place for somebody like that?
We wouldn't turn that down at all. I'm not going to pretend I'm something I'm not. I'm a paramedic at best. What we could definitely use, a couple of things from my viewpoint. One is strong women of faith who feel like they could tackle something like a South Sudan.
Yeah.
Sometimes those are hard to come by. It's a dangerous place. It's a dangerous place for women. Right now, like Kurt said, the women there flocked there because they're surrounded by a culture of rape and violence every single day. So when we had two women who went on that trip, and they just gravitated toward those women, right? So if we can have women of faith who are able and willing to go to a place like that, encourage the local women, that's huge. And then on the medical side of the house, if I'm always looking for mentors, right? Kurt's a great mentor spiritually. He doesn't know anything about medicine, unfortunately. But I'm always looking for someone who can mentor in the public health realm, who's done projects like in places like Africa, who could help there. Or yes, definitely a nurse, a doctor, anybody who would be willing and has Christ as a focus and would be willing to help us out. We would for sure take them on board. We wouldn't turn that away.
Sure. Kurt, one of the things we do often here is talk about our prayer needs, and we have our Pray for America campaign, but I know that sometimes you have to be a little more circumspect about some of the countries you go in, but you're pretty upfront about this one in terms of Sudan. So as people go to nogreatercommission.org, if nothing else, signing up to have everybody in their church pray for you during that time when you're there, is that a possibility?
That'd be great. And obviously we want to lead in. We lead in everywhere we go with prayer. Mm-hmm. Prayer is key. And praying for both Pastor Stephen and his operation, his organization, who are in South Sudan, who are handling the day-to-day issues. I mean, it's easy for us to come back and live in our air-conditioned places. We go to our Starbucks and we go down the road to buy food, but that's not the case in any way, shape, or form there. And so praying for him and peace in the region. One of our guys is currently a close friend of ours who works with us also, is there working with the U.S. government. And he sent me a message yesterday saying, hey, we're close to brokering the peace agreement that would handle the transition and also the share of power. And he's like, pray for what's going on right now, because if both military functions of the rebels and the government functions agree on this, then we have a legitimate, sustainable peace operation. Then we're not killing a bunch of people. And so prayer for the government there, prayer for us is a big deal. Our trip's going to happen in the October timeframe. But obviously the Christians should be praying for these regions and praying for these people specifically, because, and like I said before, is that this area, that's essentially a line, and you see light and darkness. And there's a physical battle playing out in a spiritual realm. Yes. And we see it come to fruition right there. And either salt and light's going to be there, or it's going to get beat back. And so we choose to be the salt and light there.
Let me give you some assignments just before we take another break. And first assignment is that we have the video there, No Greater Commission. And so it's 6 minutes long. So what I'm encouraging all of you as listeners to do is to watch the video. It's only going to take 6 minutes of your life, and it's very interesting. It's well done. And then on the lower right-hand corner, you see there's a share button there, or actually the upper right-hand corner is where we put it this time. And I would encourage you to click on that share button and then put it somewhere. Put it on your Facebook page if you have a Facebook page, your blog, or maybe send it to your pastor, your missions pastor, and say, okay, what are we doing to reach Sudan? And if the answer comes back, well, nothing. Well, here's something we could do, at least indirectly, to reach Sudan. And that would be one, I think, great action item. So again, we have made it possible on our website, pointofview.net, to find out a couple of things. First of all, there's information about both Kurt and Charity, and you can see their bios and their pictures, as well as the website, which, again, we've already mentioned, is nogreatercommission.org. But we also have the video for you to watch, and so I'm giving you a responsibility here to watch the video. Click on that share button, send it to someone, and maybe ask somebody, it's maybe a position of authority in your church, what they might want to do to see if they can make this possible. But we need to take a break. We'll come back and finish off our conversation with Kurt and Charity. Second hour, we're going to change topics, but I thought you would be interested in finding out a little bit more about what God is doing in some of the war-torn areas of the world, really challenging your view of missions. And after all, that's why we're here on earth, right? To fulfill the Great Commission. Let's take a break. We'll come back with more right after this.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
For a few more minutes as we talk about No Greater Commission, Kurt Parsons and Charity Gardner. And Kurt, we've only really focused on Sudan, which is fascinating enough, and certainly that's the primary focus of your website. But what are some other projects you've been involved with or other future plans that you have?
So the future plans include some these few other countries in the Middle Eastern area. Specifically, we have some friends that are working in Lebanon, and we have some friends that are working in a couple of Muslim Southeast Asian countries. And so those are really some of the next steps that we're doing, and we'll look for larger funding. And we have teams that are already, some of our guys are already working in the region for the U.S., and so then we'll go there and help the other Christian organizations. And And the dynamic there is a little bit different. There, we're going to assess the security and help them with some security needs, and then just help them shape their posture of missionaries going in and out of that country. Our guys are highly skilled in understanding the security element and force protection and the physical security needs of people. And so we're going to go there and try and help them with what's going on there and help protect with shaping some of the protection.
Well, again, so then there are going to be all sorts of other upcoming needs. So again, even if people can't come on this trip, there may be some other opportunities, right?
Well, and that's right. And then follow on to the South Sudan element. Specifically, there's some large-scale water projects for the region. There's an energy project for the region, and then there's also a road project for the region. So we would like to go deep with South Sudan and the Bor area, help empower this pastor and not just kind of move on and go to the next shiny thing. But the need is great throughout the whole region, throughout the whole Middle East. And so we'd like to help him and really go deep and get the roots and the structure and whatever else comes up, because a lot more things are going to come up, and most likely force protection and things like this will come up. And so we're going to help.
Are there any places you go that where security isn't such a big deal, maybe Haiti and some of those? Because I know some of our listeners would say, I've always wanted to go on a short-term mission trip, and but I would love to know a little bit more about what you're doing and how they can be involved. Or are these all ones where you have to have some kind of military experience?
It's not all. Very good question, and we get that actually pretty often.
Yeah.
So then the composition of this is normally we do go into a dangerous area.
Yes.
Well, number one, we don't go anywhere that we're not called to go.
Right.
Meaning that the Lord calls us to go to these areas, and then we go. It's not like, hey, what's dangerous? Let's go there. It's like, where's Jesus calling us to go? Where's the Holy Spirit leading us to go?
Right.
And then we go there, number one. And then number two, we assess the situation and we take very practical steps. Most of the time, we're avoiding the conflict altogether. And then everyone's highly trained into executing convoys, executing these missions and the flying elements. I'm a retired pilot, and so a naval pilot. And so we will go and execute to the most possible to avoid the conflict areas and avoid conflict altogether, because it doesn't do us any good to be in the crosshairs of a firefight. But then specifically, we'll go in and we can bring a couple people who don't have any training whatsoever, and then we'll equip them and train them and bring them as we go. But it is a dangerous area, and the places that we go to is our lives are at risk. I mean,
it certainly is.
But it's just as simple. When we were in Haiti, we were up in Cap Haitian, and we had a team there. There's 3 of us there, and a riot broke out and shut down everything. I mean, tires are burning, roads are getting. They tried to stone us twice, and the UN was tear gassing everybody, and so everything was shut down. But we had local Christians who really helped us, and then we had to escape through the Dominican Republic on motorcycles. So every situation is different.
Well, it certainly is. So again, just before we run out of time, and we're just about out of time, let's talk about some of those resources that you are looking for, because I would encourage people to go to the website, and we'll click on it one more time here. But again, it is nogreatercommission.org, and you are explaining what you're going to be doing in Sudan. But again, if people wanted to follow you, they could certainly do that, pray for you when you are involved in that, and also figure out whether or not they could send somebody that has that kind of training that could join with your team. So let's talk about all the different ways they can connect up.
So then right now we have the team formed, and we're working to get resources. And the resources that we need is essentially $130,000 to cover the expenses to help Pastor Stephen and his team and the needs that they have. And then the follow-on will be another energy project, will be a water project, will be the road project. But if people are interested, we have a link there where they can email us and say, hey, I have this skill set or this resource, and I can put to bear there. For example, if we're doing a water project, I mean, we don't need to reinvent it. There's several groups in the area that are doing well projects, and they're already funded. So then they can come alongside and help do that. We don't need to raise new funds for a group that's already doing it. And that's part of our calling, is to help unite and bring together Christian organizations that are operating in the area, and then help each other out. Haiti's an example of that. We know of a group that's doing wells there, and we know of a group that needs wells, and so we help team those things together so that we're not wasting funds. There's no need to use the kingdom's resources fruitlessly. So we want to make sure that we make that go as far as possible.
Charity, let me ask you too, because as I mentioned just a minute ago, there may be a doctor, maybe one that's been a missionary doctor in the past and said, I've never done something like this before, and I'd like to come along, or a nurse, or other people that are maybe paramedics, and join with you. So what are some of the opportunities, if indeed these open up in the future?
I would love that. Any of those that you listed. Like Kurt said, we all have jobs and families, and so we take leave to go do these things. So there's going to be an instance where I can't attend the trip, and right now I'm our medical asset. So I definitely need people on board, and would be very excited if anybody would want to come on board with us. Doctors, paramedics, nurses, anything that fits that mold. Anybody in the public health, anybody in microbiology, any of those things, or somebody could find. We could put them to work. Definitely, we could find a way for them to serve.
So again, my responsibility for some of you is to say maybe you could actually join with them. In other cases, you might be able to support them. But I think all of you have a responsibility, and that is we have the video there. It's 6 minutes long, and I encourage you to take the time to watch it. It won't take you very long at all. It's right there on the website. It's also on their website, but we've made it easy by even having it on the Point of View website. Then click on that share button and put it on your Facebook page. Maybe you have a blog and say, hey, I heard this interview with these people that are actually taking missions to war-torn areas of the world. I knew nothing about this. Maybe you need to know more about it as well. Most importantly, I hope that some of you will pass it on to your pastor, your missions pastor, your Bible fellowship, or your Sunday school teacher, something like that, and encourage them to see what they might want to do in terms of praying for this, or giving, or going. So pray, give, go. That's pretty simple, isn't it? So I think that's the case.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time to come all the way over here and be in studio with us.
Thank you for having
today.
us. We really appreciate it.
And thank you for volunteering your time to do this, because it's quite obvious that you have day jobs, just like the rest of us do. And yet you recognize that this is all for the kingdom. So it's been great to have you here today.
Absolutely.
Just about out of time in this segment. We'll continue on in the second segment. We're going to get into some other issues, but I thought I would real quickly mention that a few of you are going to vote tomorrow. And if you haven't gotten already your Pray, Organize, and Vote resources, they are still available. Some of you have already voted, and I'm encouraging you to go back and click on that banner, because on that banner, Pray, Organize, and Vote, we also have you encouraging you to take the pledge. So even if you've been there before, please go back and take the pledge. It's a pledge, first of all, to pray for this nation. Number two, to educate and encourage others to find out some of the information we're making available. And then finally, to vote. I know a large number of you in the listening audience have already voted. Of course, those of you in Montana and California and North Dakota and South Dakota, of course, even tomorrow, Utah and Arizona, you haven't voted yet. So we encourage you also to click on there and get some of the information. And we certainly do have a lot that we have added even in the last couple of weeks. So take the time to go back to Point of View and click on that button that says Pray, Organize, and Vote. And as you go there, you can also click on the pictures of Kurt and Charity, find out more about what they're doing as well. And if you would like to maybe pass this on to your pastor, you could also download the podcast or the live cast on YouTube and send it to him or her that are involved in some of the aspects of church leadership or missions. And so we encourage you to find all of that at our website, pointofview.net. Second hour, we're going to get into some other issues with our good friends that are addressing some very important issues. So we'll spend a little bit of time talking with Dr. Danny Burt. That's coming up right after this.
Columbia Pictures presents, in association with Affirm Films, Miracles from Heaven. When 10-year-old Anna Bean develops a rare incurable disease, her mother devotes herself to finding a solution.
Miracles are everywhere.
Then, after Anna has a freak accident, a miracle unfolds. How do we explain the impossible? Miracles from Heaven, starring Jennifer Gardner, now playing. Rated PG, parental guidance suggested. More information is available at miraclesfromheaven-movie.com.
How critical is the 2016 election? Well, the next president will very likely appoint at least 2, even 3 Supreme Court justices. Our on-budget debt is approaching $20 trillion, and the threats of war and terrorism all too real. Given these things, we're asking you to pray for our nation and to educate and encourage others to get involved. Sign up today at pointofview.net. We'll send reminders to help you pray, organize, and vote. Pointofview.net. Click on the banner, Pray, Organize, Vote. The future of America is at stake. We need to pray. Pointofview.net. Point of View will continue after this.
I just thank God for y'all. I listen to you every day, truly. I wanted to thank y'all for everything you do each day to inform Christian families and our community about the things we can do, and just the way you're so informative. I listen to you daily and love you guys and appreciate you so much.
God bless you, Kerby, for keeping this show so on track and for the decades of wonderful help to this nation that Point of View has been. We're all big fans of your work, and we pray that God will just prosper it.
As a Christian, over the years that I've followed this program, I am constantly challenged to be on guard and to evaluate what's going on. And if for no other reason, to protect the caliber and the truth of your programming, I need to participate and to back your program financially to ensure that the truth stays out there for people to hear, to view, and to be a part of.
This is Point of View Radio.
Hi, this is Kirby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging. Apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, friends and society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kirby Anderson.
Second hour, if you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. Supposed to be talking with Dr. Denny Burke, haven't connected with him, so we'll get into that conversation with him when we're able to do so. But today, first day of spring, very important, but also a day just before another set of votes in Arizona for 58 delegates on the Republican side, 44 delegates in Utah. Some very important races, so we're going to pay attention to that. And you may have noticed over the weekend some of the controversy that broke out there when there were various progressive groups that decided to block the highway leading to a Trump rally. Led to all sorts of Facebook comments, for example, like, do you remember when the Tea Party blocked the route to individuals that wanted to attend a Barack Obama event? And said, yeah, neither did we. So there are going to be a lot of people that are going to try to say, well, we always have controversy. Yeah, I don't really remember too many conservative groups blocking a highway to an event for Hillary Clinton, Bernie Sanders, Barack Obama, but here you go. And we saw certainly that case in terms of what played out in Arizona. So again, some votes tomorrow in American Samoa, as well as Arizona, then Utah. Then we have a bit of a break, and we go into April. Then you have North Dakota, Wisconsin, about middle of the month, New York, Connecticut, Delaware, Maryland, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island. And then we go into May, which is Indiana, Nebraska, West Virginia, Oregon, Washington, and then the last series of primaries on June 7th, California, Montana, New Jersey, New Mexico, South Dakota. And then it will all be over. But nevertheless, wanted to give you a chance to comment on some of that. What about this idea of blocking a highway to a political event? They were thrown in jail. As a matter of fact, interestingly enough, you don't really want to cross Sheriff Joe Arpaio, do you? I mean, he's the one that decided that they would put everybody in jail, and so I'd love to get some of your thoughts and comments on that as well. If you receive my commentary, you might know that my commentary today also kind of parallels that unintentionally, and that is you have what I call the Missouri controversy, because you might remember all of the racial controversies that developed at the University of Missouri, and in the end, of course, you have the chancellor and the president resigned. And then once that happened, I thought it was pretty obvious what was going to be the next step, and that is I was sure it was going to have some kind of detrimental impact on student enrollment. Well, it did. Fox Sports was able to obtain a copy of the interim chancellor's letter to the university community. Here's what it said. Quote, I'm writing to you today to confirm that we project a very significant budget shortfall due to the unexpected sharp decline in first-year enrollments and student retention this coming fall, unquote. Now, my first comment is unexpected decline? What do you mean unexpected decline? I think as soon as these controversies broke out, it was pretty obvious what exactly was going to happen. I mean, think about this. Weeks of news coverage that catered to some of these outrageous claims that were being made, some of the outrageous demands that were being made on the campus by many of these radicals, I think would certainly make a lot of students and most importantly their parents to say, we need to maybe reconsider whether or not you want to go to the University of Missouri. Well, nevertheless, the interim chancellor went on to explain that a significantly lower enrollment now leaves the university with about a $32 million budget gap. And I might mention that shortfall is going to continue, because recognize that when you have an incoming class of freshmen, they go through the system. They become sophomores, juniors, seniors. Sometimes it takes a while. Sometimes they don't graduate in 4 years, but it's like a pipeline. So if you have fewer students come in the freshman year, you're still dealing with the impact of that 4 years later, or at least 3 years later for sure. And so I think you can begin to see that this is a real problem for the university. So a $32 million budget gap is horrendous for a university at this time. And of course, in order to deal with that, the university has to come up with something. So the administration has basically implemented an across-the-board hiring freeze for all units on campus. So that means no new staff, no new faculty, no new raises. Matter of fact, their annual merit increase program will be zero for the entire campus. And I thought about the irony, and I mentioned that today in my commentary. Many of these radicals were saying, we need more African-American professors to be hired. And there's nothing necessarily wrong with that, good or bad. If that's what you think you need, and if indeed more diversity among the faculty is something you would certainly want to have the university achieve, well, okay. But just think about this. Because of the controversy by the radicals, no new professors, black, white, Latino, none of them are getting hired, because this has been such a major budget gap and shortfall that nobody else is getting hired. And so this is, if nothing else, just a reality check, and that is, this is the huge financial cost that takes place when, say, campus radicals get national attention and ruin a university's reputation. So I'd love to get your thoughts about this. We had, over the weekend, radicals blocking the road to a Trump event. We have radicals that have been demanding certain things at the University of Missouri. And I'd love to get your thoughts about what indeed this might end up looking like in the next couple of weeks and months, and of course, in the case of Missouri, the next 3 or 4 years, because a smaller incoming freshman class then becomes sophomores, juniors, seniors, and then eventually maybe you can rectify some of the problems that were created because of the controversy that unfolded this last year. One other issue I thought I'd put on the table, when you go to places like Utah, you're not necessarily developing an evangelical vote, but you certainly have kind of a, quote, Christian vote, in the sense, Christian in the broadest sense of the word, because it's primarily a Mormon vote. So I'd love to know your thoughts about, is it possible that Ted Cruz does better in Utah? Is it possible that Donald Trump does better in Arizona? And one of the great puzzles for a lot of people is how Donald Trump has been able to get so much of the evangelical vote. And on this program, I've mentioned, and tomorrow's commentary gets into it in a little more detail, in which if you look at the evangelical vote for Donald Trump, it isn't that it's that much greater. It's about what it was for John McCain and Mitt Romney. But the real puzzle, I think, has to do with the fact that it shouldn't have been quite as high, given the fact that you had other so-called evangelical candidates running, like Marco Rubio, in the past, of course, Mike Huckabee, and more recently, Ted Cruz. And in the case of Iowa, Ted Cruz did get a much higher percentage of the evangelical vote. But by the time you got to South Carolina, and since then, I think in large part due to the endorsement of people like Jerry Falwell Jr. and others, Donald Trump has been able to get a much larger evangelical vote. So what does that mean tomorrow in terms of the vote in Arizona, the vote in Utah? Love to get your comments, and if you'd like to join us, that number is 1-800-351-1212. Our plan is to talk with Dr. Denny Burke, but I wanted to give you a chance maybe to comment on some of the campaign, some of the controversy, and in particular, I'd love to get your thoughts about what about these radicals that seem to take over the campus, now have done very significant financial damage, I would say, to the University of Missouri, but also have blocked individuals from being able to go to a Donald Trump rally in Arizona. What are your thoughts? 1-800-351-1212. We'll take some of your calls right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
You know, we're all familiar with the racial controversies that developed at the University of Missouri. In the end, the chancellor and the president resigned. Once that happened, it was easy to see that the controversy and the subsequent resignations would have had a detrimental impact on student enrollment. Apparently, this caught the university off guard. Fox Sports has been able to obtain a copy of the interim chancellor's letter to the university community. He said, "I am writing to you today to confirm that we project a very significant budget shortfall due to an unexpected sharp decline in first-year enrollments and student retention this fall." This should not have been an unexpected decline in student enrollments. Weeks of news coverage that catered to some of the outrageous claims and demands of campus radicals certainly would make both students and their parents reconsider whether they wanted to enroll in the University of Missouri. The interim chancellor went on to explain that the significantly lower enrollment leaves the university with a $32 million budget gap. And we might mention that the shortfall will continue each year as the smaller entering freshman class makes its way through various degree programs. In order to deal with this major financial hit, the administration has implemented an across-the-board hiring freeze for all units on campus. No new staff, no new faculty, no new raises. The annual merit increase program will be zero for the entire campus. Think of the irony. Many of the radicals wanted more African-American professors to be hired. Because of the racial controversy, no new professors, black, white, or Latino, will be hired this year or perhaps for many years to come. This is the huge financial cost when campus radicals get national attention and ruin a university's reputation. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
From Columbia Pictures and Affirm Films, Miracles from Heaven. How do we explain the impossible? Now playing, rated PG, miraclesfromheaven-movie.com.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back once again, if you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. Kind of interesting, we have votes tomorrow, Arizona and Utah. Of course, Utah gives us the Mormon component, and I think some of you want to address that issue. So let's go to South Carolina and talk to Brad. Brad, thank you for joining us today here on Point of View. Do we have Brad?
About Glenn Beck endorsing Ted Cruz out in Utah, and does Ted Cruz endorse Glenn Beck's religion?
Yeah, what did you think about that? Because I think at one point, Glenn Beck, if I read this correctly, and I always recognize when I get a news report, sometimes it might have been filtered and not necessarily accurately reported, but assuming that it was, then Glenn Beck said that even the Cruz campaign and the decline in fidelity to the Constitution or a fulfillment of Mormon prophecy or something like that. Did you read that?
Yes, and I was just wondering, because if he subscribes to the Mormon faith, Glenn Beck, he's not really subscribing to the same faith that wrote our Constitution, is he?
And that's a question. You know, it's the same issue we dealt with 4 years ago with Mitt Romney. You know, I've had a chance to interview Mitt Romney, and if we didn't talk too many areas of theology, we could get along. But as soon as you get into that, obviously, I disagree with all sorts of things that are part of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Now, if you say, and I see this as a person who joins with me to bring about fidelity to the Constitution, I'll join hands with all sorts of people that I theologically disagree with. But that's different than saying I say that you're orthodox in terms of your theology. So sometimes you have to be careful about how you word that, because sometimes by agreeing with somebody who is willing to maybe push forward an agenda, Doesn't necessarily mean that I agree with everything that they believe, but that's a question that certainly surfaced over the weekend, didn't it?
Yes, it did. I was just wondering, because I don't believe that Mormons subscribe to the deity of Christ, do they?
Yeah, well, they believe that everyone's a god, ultimately could be. I guess I should be more careful about that. So they believe that Jesus is not the only person that can come to a level of deity, but you and I possibly could as well.
Well, I don't think I could possibly be God, but
that's another story. Yeah, and I wasn't going to get into a theological discussion, but it's back to the point is that, when you go to Utah, it gets called the evangelical vote, and I said, well, it's not really evangelical. I mean, again, some Mormons will call themselves evangelicals, but I think we all know that there's a theological difference there. So I say maybe it's the Christian vote in the broadest sense of the word, but not, obviously not Orthodox in terms of the faith. And yet, again, most of the people voting in Utah are probably going to either be Mormons or probably are at least understanding of Mormon thought and maybe even sympathetic to it. And, of course, Mike Lee, who actually I think Ted Cruz said he wouldn't mind putting Mike Lee on the Supreme Court, which, again, would be, I guess, the first Mormon that would actually serve on the Supreme Court. So there is all sorts of issues that surfaced out there in Salt Lake City, Utah this weekend, didn't they?
They sure did. Well, and I just want to thank you for your program, and just wanted your thought on that subject.
Well, it's a good question. Again, that's, I had somebody else say, well, why are you saying Christian? Well, I'm saying in the broadest sense of the word, because when we talk about the evangelical vote sometimes gets perverted into meaning, well, Catholic, Protestant, anybody that calls themselves born again. Well, again, there is some very important theological distinctions, and I think those are important to try to keep. But do they get lumped by the mainstream media? Yes, because they don't understand some of those issues. And it reminds me one time back in 1976 when Jimmy Carter was running for the presidency. He was claiming to be a born-again Christian, and I don't necessarily have to disagree with that, but there were people that came onto the secular newscast that night and said, born again, that word is in the Bible. I found it in the Bible. And then a couple of years later, during the 1980 campaign, you had Jimmy Carter running, and of course you had Ronald Reagan running. At that point, everybody's talking about born-again Christians running for the presidency and all of that. And I remember one of these reporters asked, Cal Thomas, are you an evangelical Christian? And he said, well, I don't know. What do you mean by that? He said, well, you know. He said, no, I know, but I don't think you know. And so there is a sense in which these terms get thrown around by the secular press, and it's really important to be able to properly define them. And so one of the issues, of course, is the issue of will Ted Cruz win in Utah? That's 40 delegates. The other is will, and it looks like likely, Donald Trump win in Arizona, which is 58 delegates. So let's go to North Carolina, because I think Billy wants to speak to the issue of Donald Trump. So, Billy, thank you for joining us today.
Yes, thank you for letting me join. I just wanted to get out that any Republican that's holding any kind of House, Senate seat, or whatever, that does not endorse Donald Trump if he's the nominee, it's just about like treason. I mean, they're saying we want to do what we want to do. We don't care what the American voters. If he gets voted as the nominee, that means that the senators and who don't want him are saying, we don't care what you want. We're going to run the show the way we usually do, and it's a disaster like it's always been.
Let me just mention that, go ahead, but I wanted to mention as a programming note that I'm going to try to see if we can get Senator Sass on, because he is a senator from Nebraska and said he will not vote for Donald Trump. But this Wednesday, we do have Eric Erickson on, and we'll talk a little bit about his book. But Eric Erickson said not only am I not going to vote for him, but he's working feverishly right now to come up with a third-party candidate alternative, which I think if he does get somebody that is maybe, quote, more acceptable to certain Republicans, it will guarantee that Donald Trump, if he's the nominee, will not win. So I want to give you a chance to ask questions of Eric Erickson, just as I gave you questions last week to ask of Robert Jeffress, because these are issues that I think we need to hash out, and Point of View seems like a good place to take those questions.
I mean, when enough people nominate him, that means the majority is wanting him there. and then a few senators that want to keep running the show the way they normally do, says we want to endorse him. I mean, that's just slapping us in the face saying, well, we don't care what the American people want. We got to run this show the way we want to. And, you know, big business is going to tell us what to do, not the people that voted us in.
Billy, let me try this one on, see if you agree or disagree. 8 years ago, even though some of us around the table weren't that thrilled about John McCain, they told us, and I'm talking about they, meaning these Republican senators, these establishment people, these lobbyists, and these big business people that were in the Republican Party, they, so now I've defined who they is, they told us, even if you don't like John McCain, you need to just get in line and vote for John and McCain, and you need to endorse John McCain. 4 years ago, they, the same they, basically said, you may not like Mitt Romney, okay, we don't necessarily agree with his theology, but that's okay. He's the nominee. He's our establishment. So you need to get in line and support him, endorse him, and vote for him. This time, those same they are saying, we don't like Donald Trump, so we are going to go try to find a third-party candidate. Do you see some inconsistencies there at all?
Yeah, yes, I do. And what I see was the Republican Party was going crazy until he signed up with them, you know, thinking that he might run independent or something. And now they're turning their back on him when he agreed to do it. But I'm just saying, you got to go what the people want, and we have not had that in 100 years.
Well, we'll give it a try. Back to the establishment, Donald Trump was meeting with some people today that you might consider to be establishment. So we'll see how that plays out. But we will have Eric Erickson on Wednesday, and he's really saying, I am not going to vote for Donald Trump. I am not going to endorse him. By the way, he's oftentimes a guest host for Rush Limbaugh.
Well, he's saying he don't want to vote for what his people want him to do.
Yeah.
He wants to do what he wants to do.
He lives in Georgia, and the people in Georgia voted for Donald Trump. This is the way it turned out.
So he's slapping them in the face, saying, this is my show. I'm going to do what I want to do.
Well,
I mean, that's just like Cruz. He says, you know, hey, I might look at a Mormon to put there. Quit begging for votes and lying to people. You know, don't say nothing to give you some votes, you know. If it happens, it happens. But, you know, just don't tell the Utah that just to get their vote.
Good point. Billy, appreciate your phone call. I need to take one of those breaks, and we will do so. But when we come back, maybe you have some comments about some of the radicals that have certainly been on college campuses. That's my commentary today about the Missouri controversy. And, of course, I also mentioned some of the radicals that shut down the road to a Donald Trump rally. What about that? And as I said, I've got such a kick out of looking at some of the Facebook posts saying, remember when the Tea Party closed down the roads to a Barack Obama event? No, neither do I. But nevertheless, we'll probably hear from the mainstream media about how, you know, both sides are really controversial. And I'm thinking one side actually wouldn't even allow people to drive to the rally until the police showed up and finally drug a few of them off to jail. So I'd love to get your thoughts about that as well. And, of course, anybody up there in Arizona or Utah, love to know how the campaign is going. Have you seen any of the ads? What do you think is going to happen tomorrow? All that coming up right after this.
Columbia Pictures presents, in association with Affirm Films, Miracles from Heaven. When 10-year-old Anna Bean develops a rare incurable disease, her mother devotes herself to finding a solution.
Miracles are everywhere.
Then, after Anna has a freak accident, a miracle unfolds. How do we explain the impossible? Miracles from Heaven, starring Jennifer Gardner, now playing. Rated PG, parental guidance suggested. More information is available at miraclesfromheaven-movie.com.
How critical is the 2016 election? Well, the next president will very likely appoint at least 2, even 3 Supreme Court justices. Our on-budget debt is approaching $20 trillion, and the threats of war and terrorism all too real. Given these things, we're asking you to pray for our nation and to educate and encourage others to get involved. Sign up today at pointofview.net. We'll send reminders to help you pray, organize, and vote. Pointofview.net. Click on the banner, Pray, Organize, Vote. The future of America is at stake. We need to pray. Pointofview.net. Point of View will continue after this.
are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Final half hour. If you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. We did make a connection with Dr. Danny Burke. We'll put him on again in the future. His book, Transforming Homosexuality, a fascinating book. It deserves an hour, and we will give that to him in the future. Instead, we'll continue taking your phone calls, and let's head out to Georgia. Jacob, thank you for calling today.
Yeah, thank you, Kerby, for accepting my call. I'm thinking that Christians need to rethink their plans of not voting for Donald Trump if he is the candidate who are chosen.
Yes.
Because when Mitt Romney was running, 30 million Christians wouldn't vote. So what they did, they didn't vote for him, but they voted for Obama. And many people have a problem with the attitude of Donald Trump as he being egotistical and all of that. But who have issued more executive orders than Obama have during his administration? And we are forgetting that if Hillary is the chosen one, that she's totally against morality. And she's in agreement with killing babies up to 9 months by Planned Parenthood and all those organizations that is against morality. And we have the standards, and marriage has been totally turned around. And Hillary stands for all of those things that the Bible say that we shouldn't do. She stands to do those things. And I think Christians and all other people who are interested in trying to take our nation back, interested in trying to help our youth grow up in a nation that is not full of immorality, we got to look at what Donald Trump is about, and we got to look at what Hillary is about, and we know Hillary is totally against morality. And I have one other point, and then I'll get off the air. I am traveling from state to state now, speaking on black genocide.
Oh, good for you. Thank you.
You know that 85% of the blacks will vote Democrat. And we are killing 1,865 black babies every day in America through abortion by Planned Parenthood. That's very black genocide.
Yeah, very true. Yes.
And then we're killing black-on-black crime is killing over 9,000 blacks in the United States. And we're going to have to try to find a way to reach these black pastors and preachers who are stuck on the Democratic Party and teaching their people not to vote for a Republican because they have an idea that all Republicans are racist and all Republicans are white. And this is a major problem in the United States. And I think if we can find a way to break through to these bishops, black bishops, and all of pastors, that the Republican Party is a party that blacks originated in. And we need to look at what the men and women stand for.
Well, again, I appreciate, first of all, what you're doing. And second of all, I would certainly want to maybe encourage you to write to us, maybe just send an email or something. I'd like to know more about that. I've certainly written different commentaries on the black genocide that's taking place, as you point out, through abortion and through killings and all sorts of other things. So, first of all, may your tribe increase. And second of all, I'd like to know a little bit more about that because it certainly deserves a national platform. So thank you for what you're doing today. And I will send you an email, and thank you, Kerby. Well, thank you. Those are some numbers we've used before, but I always like to get some more information. And I've sometimes said, and I probably haven't said it in a while, that we have as many reporters to Point of View as we have listeners. Any one of you can give us information and pass it on. As a matter of fact, I'll admit right now on my desk I have a few things I haven't had a chance to get to yet, but I'll try to dig through those and appreciate the resources that people send to us. Sometimes they send books, sometimes they send articles, magazine articles. Wish I could respond to all of those, but, I do what I can with what I have, and it's a great opportunity to learn from you as well. Let's go back to the phones, and this time we'll go to Missouri, KNEO. Kate, thank you for joining us today.
Yes, I was just telling the lady that I'm from California, and I originally, and then I moved out here because that's where my mother was from, but I can tell you, you can't say for sure what the Republicans in California are going to do.
Nope.
They're not. Trump keeps saying he's got California no problem, but you don't know what those people are like. They don't like it being bullied. I'll tell you that. And and we've had for all the time I was there, my representative was Mormon, and his name was Wally Herger. He's the best representative we had. I voted every time for him. So if the Mormons agree with somebody, I'll tell you what, when they do their job when they get in there, and they're really good with their people, and they don't go up there and vote different than what the people ask them to. So I find that they have a religion that is different than mine, but there's some basic things in it that is the same, and that they believe in family and those type of things, and the responsibility of the parents in the home. So I just think I know that everybody's saying Donald Trump's going to get it, but it's not over yet. Now, if it goes into a contested thing and he doesn't have enough, that's what that system is all set up for. So he didn't get a majority vote. There's the others that can go. So I will vote for Donald Trump if he ends up there. I won't go into another party, but I'm willing to wait this out. I'm willing to wait for the people in California and Oregon and all those over there to make a decision too. And
and I feel, again, as you've heard me say before, I grew up in California, and I've always felt sorry for people in California. They're not the only ones that vote. On June 7th, it's California, Montana, New Jersey, New Mexico, and South Dakota. So we have listeners in New Mexico and California, New Jersey, all those places. But I always have felt sorry for California because, by the June 7th, it's all over. Matter of fact, the last time it was pretty much over in March. But this time it's not, because as you point out, there are 169 Republican delegates at stake in California. Donald Trump needs those and many others in order to get that requisite 1237. And I don't think he's going to get them. And a lot of it depends on which states do vote for Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz, I think, could win Utah. I'm thinking he's going to win a few others. He's not going to probably do very well in April because it's New York and Connecticut and Delaware and Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, Maryland. But we'll see. That's why we hold these. And it might change. And certainly Nebraska, West Virginia, and some of those in May, Indiana, those could be Ted Cruz places. And if that's the case, as you point out, it could then become a contested convention. Donald Trump would come with maybe more delegates than Ted Cruz, but he wouldn't have the majority, which you need 1237 in order to get it. So it could go through a first ballot. And then what happens on the second ballot, who knows? So it's a possibility. And that's why we'll see. We'll wait it out.
Yep. Thanks.
Well, thank you so very much for reminding us of that. And again, those of you in California, your vote's going to matter a whole lot more than it has in the last couple of years. And of course, I'm not just talking about those of you in Montana, but also New Mexico, Montana, New Jersey, South Dakota. Of course, the week before you have Washington, and 2 weeks before that you have Oregon. So pretty much the West Coast, as well as New Jersey, and of course some of the Southwest and upper Midwest. Those are still some places where indeed your vote is going to matter. Let's take another phone call. John, KAVX in Texas. Thank you for joining us today.
Hey, Kerby, I just got one little comment. During your commercial break, Hillary was quoted by SRN News as warning the American people that Donald Trump has no experience or expertise in dealing with international affairs. I just would like to say it seems that she has slept since Benghazi, and the selective memory in the Clinton family just stuns me.
It is amazing. They call that chutzpah in the Jewish tradition. Others have more quaint words for it, but you know what I'm getting at. And that is just the incredible ability that when you have had what many people, even on the Democratic side, will sometimes begrudgingly admit, a relatively failed foreign policy, then to stand up there and to say, well, this man has no foreign policy experience. Well, how's it been working for those of you that have foreign policy experience? And it took until last Friday, I guess it was Wednesday. I take that. I wasn't on Friday. Wednesday, for the current Secretary of State, John Kerry, to conclude that the killing of all these Christians by ISIS is genocide. Well, it took a while, but finally common sense broke out even in Washington, D.C. But I appreciate your point, and it's a good point to remind ourselves that sometimes when people are attacking, they are, in many cases, guilty of some of those same issues. And if you get my commentaries, you know a while back we drew a picture of a glass house with Hillary's pictures on it, just saying you don't really want to throw stones if you live in a glass house. We'll come back with some more phone calls right after this.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back for a few more minutes, let me just mention that tomorrow we're going to have Dr. Jeremiah Johnston in studio with us. We've talked about his book, Unanswered, and we're going to focus on one of the chapters there on the resurrection and some of the evidence for that, and I thought it would be really good during this Easter week. Bill Purvis will be in studio with us. And of course, I've mentioned some of the others that will be joining us later in the week. Eric Erickson, Tom Gilson, and many, many more. So and Chip Ingram will be with us Thursday. So be listening to Point of View every single day. Let's go back to the phones. We'll go to North Carolina. Dwayne, thank you for calling today.
Hi, Kerby. How are you?
Very good.
Good. First of all, I just wanted to say that I am a Cruz girl, but if Trump should be the nominee, then I shall vote for him. And I wanted to say that I am very concerned about the mob mentality against him. And I think it's just something that we should really be kind of looking at and making sure that it is kind of stopped quickly, because this could really continue to grow, and it will keep us from being able to do what our Constitution says we can do, to vote.
Well, again, the best example of what happens when you don't control a mob mentality is the commentary I wrote today on the University of Missouri, and that these politically correct and kind of weak and easily bending professors and administration allow individuals with their mob mentality to take over. And, find me a time when a progressive or liberal professor or guest speaker was not allowed to speak. And I'm going to say, well, you found the one. But I can give you a long, very long, sad list of professors, of guest speakers, of invited lecturers and others who have been canceled at universities. And I can see, in the case of Missouri, how this led eventually to the firing both of the chancellor and the president, actually the resignation of them, but that was just a forced jump. And I just think that's what happens on the university campus. So if what's happened on a campus breaks out into society where anybody can go into any kind of rally and disrupt it, and they are doing this with some regularity now in these Trump rallies. It's going to be. It's also going to be happening in Cruz rallies and everything else. I got a feeling that it'll occasionally happen in a Hillary rally, but nothing like what is happening right now against the Republican candidates.
Well, last night, Fox News on Waters World had a documentary. There's two men that did a documentary on the Chicago incident, and Bill Ayers. They actually interviewed him in the documentary. And so, he was there, and they were talking to the people, and so many of them were college age. And, they don't understand that what they are doing is what they are accusing us of doing, and we're not doing that.
Yeah, and the mainstream media then says, well, there's controversies on both sides. Oh, really? I just want to get one of them in a room and say, tell me the last time you know of any guest speaker who was a liberal who was prevented from speaking at a major university. I can't think of one. And if you can come up with one, okay, that's the one. But I can come up with a list that is long, whether it's, of course, Ben Carson, the number of times he's been mistreated is legend now. And Condoleezza Rice and Jean Kirkpatrick. The list goes on and on. I'm not going to waste time just going through the long list. Maybe I'll do a commentary on all the people I've been able to find who have been actually prevented from getting onto the podium because of these bullies. And I think if you want more of that, because we've already seen what happens on the campus, don't prosecute these individuals. And I thought, boy, with Joe Arpaio, the sheriff, he decided, well, I'm going to throw three of them in jail right off the bat. And I don't know how many. And I think there'll probably be more going into jail any day now. So we'll see how that plays out. But it's this mob mentality is really dangerous. This is not where we want to go in America.
No, it is not. Well, thank you, Kerby.
Thank you so very much for your call. It was a great comment. Let's, if we can, see if we get a few more phone calls. If I run out of time, there's always tomorrow. Kenny, KCTA in Texas, you have the floor.
Okay. Yeah. I've listened to Donald Trump, and a lot of the things he's saying, he's not really saying a whole lot. I think Ted Cruz is probably the more Christian candidate, because Donald Trump, he kind of doubled back on what he says, and I'm not really understanding why he's attracting so much Christian vote. I don't know if it's that people don't know a lot about Ted Cruz, but Ted Cruz is really the only candidate that has stood up to the Washington establishment and speaks the truth.
I think he's won in 9 states, and he wins very well. He does very well when it's a closed primary, and it's not necessarily always even a winner-take-all, but those crossover votes have been helpful for Donald Trump. So not everybody voting for Donald Trump, first of all, is Republican. Not all of them are voting for him because he's a Christian, or is not. That's sort of irrelevant to them. But, I think your point's well taken. There are a number of individuals that said if it was a battle between Ted Cruz and Donald Trump from the beginning, instead of 17 candidates, I think Ted Cruz would probably be the nominee. But that's just the way it played out so far. So we'll see what happens over the next couple of weeks. What do you think?
Yeah, next couple of weeks we'll tell the story. I know it's out of my control.
I assume you voted for him. Yeah.
Yes, I voted for Ted Cruz. It's like to me, it's kind of like the Bible says when God was ruling over Israel, and they wanted to appoint their own king, and they, every time they would choose the wrong one. God had to give them the king that He wanted them to have, but the people weren't who they want. So, God knows what's happening. So in the end, He's in control still. So.
Well, Kenny, appreciate your phone call. Apologize for those of you that did not get through. I tell you what, we will provide that opportunity for you tomorrow. Now, first hour, I wanted to spend just a little bit of time kind of recognizing that it is Resurrection Week. And so we'll have Dr. Jeremiah Johnston in studio. His new book, which we've already focused on, Unanswered, I wanted to have him come back, and he's now going to be in studio with us and is a professor at Houston Baptist University, and also is a graduate of Oxford University, but a great communicator. We're going to talk about just chapter 2 of his book on the resurrection. We just thought it'd be a great opportunity to kind of focus our minds and attentions on that. So that's what we're going to do in the first hour. Then Bill Purvis will be with us in the second hour, and we'll be talking about his book, Make a Break for It. But along the way, we'll also pay a little bit of attention to what's happening. But then on Wednesday, we will spend some time looking back on these 2 very important races in Arizona and Utah. Of course, there's one in American Samoa. And so we will still keep track of this, but there are other things to talk about besides the presidential election, but we will continue to do that. And that's why we encourage you to tune in every single day. As you go to the website, pointofview.net, recognize that we have our Pray, Organize, and Vote. I know that a very significant number of you have already voted, and so I'm encouraging you to visit that website again because we have our pledge. And on the pledge there's an opportunity for you to pledge to pray for our nation, a pledge to educate and encourage others to get involved, and finally, a pledge to vote. And so we encourage those individuals to do so. However, if you're in some of those states I mentioned just a minute ago and it's still time for you to vote, we have information for more than just the presidential campaign. Many of you live in states where there's a senatorial race. All of you live in a community where you have a race for the House of Representatives. A very significant number of you live in states where there's a governor's race, a state legislative race. So if you don't know who some of those candidates are, we're trying to provide as much information to you as possible during the primaries. And of course, we'll certainly be providing that during the general election. Hope you appreciated the program today, and we'll get Dr. Denny Burke on in the future. I want to thank Andrew, Catherine, and Shamila for their help behind the scenes. We'll see you back here tomorrow.
Later this year, for the 58th time, America will choose a president. As a Christian, what are you doing to prepare for the election? Helping you cut through the major media spin is part of the mission of Point of View. We want to provide the best election resources, including a new website, Pray, Organize, Vote, encouraging people to intercede for the upcoming election, to help you get registered so you can exercise the stewardship of voting, to share things to help you get people involved and out to the polls. But to do all of that, we need you to vote right now with your support for Point of View. Show us that you're in this for the long haul as a citizen of heaven as well as the United States. Click Donate Now at the top of the page and give the most generous one-time gift you can at pointofview.net or call 1-800-347-5151. There is a lot of work to be done. Let's get to it together. pointofview.net and 800-347-5151. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.